Hi friends, it's Mrs. Miller and we are returning to the Missing Manatee Chapter 11. When I got home, Mom wasn't back from work yet. Mima looked up from the newspaper she was reading. Her blue eyes got real big. "Why, Skeeter," she said, "your face is redder than my good boots." I glanced in the mirror and groaned. I'd forgotten sunscreen, along with everything else. The constant blaring sun was another aspect of Florida living that freaked Mom out. She worried all the time about sunburn and skin cancer. It was a real concern for fishing guides who were out on the water all the time, and another problem Mom had with Mac's way of life. "Come on in the bathroom with me right now," said Mima. "Let's get something on that before your mother gets home and has a conniption." Ooh, what's a conniption again? Remember, we talked about this before. Mima doused me in aloe gel, talking the whole time about an ad she'd seen in the paper for a Chinese restaurant called the Golden Moon, which had just opened in town. I've never been to a Chinese restaurant, old as I am. Can you believe it? Wow, can you imagine that? Have you been to one? "First chance we get, I want to take you and your mama there. We'll try everything on the menu, even if it sounds peculiar. I hear they do cook peculiar dishes. But we won't be squeamish, will we, Skeeter? I've never been squeamish a day in my life, and I don't intend to start now. I can't abide people who won't try new things. Can you? Where's the fun in that?" Mima loved trying new things, and she loved going out to eat. She always said that any meal she didn't have to cook was a good one, and I agree. As soon as I was able to get a word in, I told her about my tarpon, and she got as excited about that as she'd been about eating Chinese food. Then Mom came home, and I told the whole story again, but not until after she had her conniption about my sunburn. Mima's aloe had made the burn feel cooler, but it hadn't done anything to hide the redness on my face. Mom put more aloe on me, fussing the whole time. "Didn't your father give you sunscreen?" Luckily, I didn't have time to answer before she went on. "And that Dan, you'd think a grown man would act more responsible, especially when he's in charge of someone else's kid." "Mom, you make it sound like I'm a little kid," I protested. "It's not Mac's fault I forgot to use sunscreen, or Dan's either. Besides," I lied, "this sunburn looks a lot worse than it feels." Seeing how upset she was, I hoped more than ever that she'd never know all the parts of the story I'd left out. By the time we'd eaten dinner and I called Mac and told him the fish story again, I was beat. It wasn't until I was in bed and about to drift off that I realized I hadn't thought about the manatee all day. I got up and dialed Mac's number again. "Hey, Mac, I forgot to ask you. Did you talk to Earl today? Did they find out anything about who killed the manatee?" "I did talk to him, and they haven't learned a thing," Mac answered. "Earl feels bad, because he says they're not really trying. It's like he told you the first day. They're busy, and there's nothing to go on." The news, or lack of it, was about what I'd expected, but it was still disappointing. "Okay," I said. "I was just wondering." "Hey, did you get a picture of that tarpon?" Mac asked. "No camera," I explained. "But that's okay," Mac interrupted to say, "because you've got a picture in your brain, don't you?" "Yeah," I said, "and that isn't ever going to fade." He's going to remember that for the rest of his life. I nodded. Then, remembering we were on the phone, I said, "I can still see it clear as anything." "I know, buddy," said Mac. "I know." The cool thing was, he really did know. "Listen, Skeet, I'm leaving tomorrow to trail the boat down to the Keys to meet a client. I'm going to fish him for 4 or 5 days, depending on how things go." "Oh," I said. "Okay. Is it that guy from Chicago who talks on his cell phone the whole time you're on the boat?" Mac chuckled. "The very same. He sure got a funny idea about getting away from it all, but what the heck. He's okay, and he's a big tipper. If I can find us some fish." "You will," I said. "Listen, buddy, you have a good time on the rest of your vacation, and I hope you hear something about the manatee soon." "Yeah, me too. We'll have fun, Mac." "I'll try, and I'll call you when I get back in town, okay? Bye." In bed, As I drifted off, I had a funny thought about parents and kids. Mom tried, but she didn't always get why tarpon fishing was so incredibly cool. And Mac tried, but he wasn't the type to make sure I ate lunch, wore sunscreen, went to bed on time, and stuff like that. Maybe that's why parents came in pairs, at least at the beginning, so one could cover the stuff the other one didn't. Now that Mom and Mac weren't together, maybe I was going to have to take care of more things by myself. I kind of wanted to think about that a little, but I must have fallen asleep 2 seconds later, in spite of my sunburn. Remember, he's got that really bad burn. When I woke up the next morning, the dead manatee was on my mind again. Along with my tarpon, I stretched and groaned at the pain in both arms. It was a good kind of pain, though, like a badge of honor. I lay in bed flexing my arms and thinking. Earl had hypothesized that the manatee's killer towed the dead body behind a boat and cut it loose somewhere way out in the Gulf of Mexico. But it was possible, I reasoned, that the manatee hadn't been taken out far. And depending on the wind direction, it might have washed up on shore, far from where I'd found it the first time, but not too far. It was possible also that the killer had towed it into a tangled maze of the backcountry. Either way, there was a chance that if I went out on my skiff looking, I'd find it. And if I did, we'd have some evidence of a crime. And with that, maybe somebody would actually work on finding that killer. A little voice kept telling me it wasn't likely that I'd find the body. But I'd felt the same way about the odds of my catching a tarpon. And look what happened. Anyway, I thought, I was on vacation and I had the time. I told myself I could work on my English paper, but then I remembered I only had to write the first draft. No big deal. I didn't need much convincing to go cruising around on my boat. I grinned, thinking, and this time I'll take plenty of food and sodas and fresh water and put a ton of sunscreen on. I needed another $8 before I could get the radio antenna I needed, but it was a clear, calm, sunny day, and I wasn't worried about the weather. As it turned out, Mom said I could go, but she insisted on putting sunscreen on me herself this time. I tried not to flinch as she touched my reddened skin. She also gave me an extremely stupid-looking hat with a big brim and ear flaps, and made me promise to wear it. I didn't argue, though, because at least she was letting me go. Greasy with sunscreen from head to toe, smelling like a giant coconut, and looking as ridiculous, I finally got out of the house. I took off the hat as soon as I was out of sight. Then, steering the skiff downriver, I knew I had to make a decision. Was I going to look for the manatee's body floating out in the Gulf or washed up on shore? The idea of trying to find something in miles of open ocean was discouraging. So I decided to search the channels that crisscrossed among the sawgrass and mangrove keys closer to shore. The tide was almost high, so the water was deep enough for my skiff, and I'd have several hours before it dropped too low to run the boat into the backcountry. That's where we're going to end part 1.